I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, and possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning into this episode where I'm going to bring you psychic Mary Ann Morgan. She was once called, or I guess she is called, an Analytical Intuitive Profiler, which looked better on the FBI's paperwork than saying, hey, we hired a psychic to come in and find the murder victim. But yeah, she's quite well known in the U.S. government and police community for helping out on missing persons and also murder files such as Lacy Peterson, Natalee Holloway, Caylee Anthony, and a number of other ones that we'll discuss. She has an interesting view on things such as murder and passing out of sequence. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about suicide, which is the one that you pass out of sequence on. We're going to talk about her friend, Robin Williams, and what we believe happened, or what she believes happens after Robin passed. We look at redemption for suicide. We talk a little bit about that. That is, basically not being held in contempt or held being punished again for taking your own life out of sequence. We touch a little bit on her friend, late Sam Kinison, and some of the stuff that they used to go through. Let's see, what do we talk about? Time, and time being man-made. We talk about angels, and a few years ago when our guides and our angels took a step back when an extraterrestrial came in and said, hey, look, you've been dealing with these spirit guides all your life. At this point of our life and at this part of time in history, we're all going to come in here and we are going to pass on some information to you. We will talk about her being tested at the Human Energy Systems Lab at University of Arizona by Dr. Gary Schwartz. It was done for, that testing was for the Discovery Channel or one of those other documentaries, and how well she did being tested, and what the test entailed of, and how she went through that, which is extremely interesting. We will touch on Lacy Peterson, Natalee Holloway, how families would get a hold of her if there's a missing person. And in actually not Natalee Holloway's case, Natalee got a hold of her. Natalee Holloway showed up in her bedroom basically saying, hey, I was murdered, and my parents will be getting a hold of you in a couple of days, so I suggest you write this stuff down. She's got an upcoming book, Between Heaven and Earth, where it's basically her answers to a number of questions. And I shouldn't say her answers, but she has a number of questions. It's people who have asked her over the years, and these are answered by her guides. She's put them all in together in a book, and she's just waiting for that right time for it to bounce out. If you want to follow along at home, go to mariannemorgan.com and read a little bit about her. We're going to talk about the Desert Rose, which was a missing woman in... I think it was Arizona. I want to say Nevada all the time, but I think it was Arizona. It was Loretta Bowerstock. And we're talking about how it's not in one person's karmic path to be maybe the police investigator to find the missing person. That maybe it's more in a young couple out on a hike's karmic path and to find the body. So again, we will discuss what a karmic path is, who is in our karmic circle, and why it is person A is the one to find the deceased. And yeah, very, very interesting conversation on Karmic Path. We'll talk about her newest case, working on a missing kayaker who has been missing for 3 years down in Georgia, and what she's doing on that. We're also going to get into something that you're going to find quite fascinating. She is given a prediction about the 2020 federal election in the United States and who's winning that, and what is going to happen to the person who wins at about the third year level. So the person who is going to win or is going to come out successful in the 2020 U.S. presidential election, she predicts is not going to finish the entire 4 years. That around year 3, something's going to happen, and she's going to talk about that. She's also going to talk a little bit about global warming and the Mondor minimum. And what is really, really interesting is that she believes, from her conversations with the other side, that Jeffrey Epstein, who had been reported to have committed suicide in New York in jail, actually isn't dead. Because she went across, she asked her guides to basically say, okay, I'd like to speak to Jeffrey and find out some dirt on what was going on. And they basically came back saying, he's not here. He hasn't crossed over. I think that's going to be a whole other episode that we'll push out later, because Marianne Morgan is not the only psychic to have Jeffrey Epstein not crossed over at this time. So I'm going to get maybe one or two of these psychics, or 2 or 3 of them all together. And we're going to discuss where he possibly is and why. We're also going to talk about her animal communication that she's been doing ever since she was a kid, and kind of asking her why she's not a vegetarian or a vegan if she talks to animals. Interesting conversation with Marianne Morgan. Again, go to her website, mariannemorgan.org. Learn a lot about this lady who you may have seen on television or in documentaries on psychic activity, missing people, and the TV series Psychic Detectives or Psychic Investigators. So let's bring her in. Marianne, how are you?
Hi, James. I'm fine. How are you?
I am well. It's frosty. I got up this morning, and there was, if I had pumpkins, they'd have frost on them. There was.
Oh my goodness!
It's that time of year again, but it was a beautiful sunny morning, or is a beautiful sunny morning here on the Pacific left coast of Canada. And how are you? You're in Oklahoma?
I'm in the Midwest right now. Yes.
Oh,
and it's cool here this morning. It's supposed to get really cool this afternoon, and all my animals are out being frisky and playing. They're enjoying it. Hopefully, it kills all the flies.
Oh, yeah, that's the important
Don't
part.
like flies.
No, you've got a lot of horses, right?
Yes, I do. We practice peace, with everything but flies.
Yes,
yes.
little flies. And for those of you following along at home, mariannemorgan.org is Marianne's website. Marianne and Ann without an E, so it's mariannemorgan.org. Drop by there. Marianne, a wonderful psychic, extremely popular, very famous psychic. When did this first start coming up into your life? When did you realize you had this ability?
Well, when I was little, I didn't realize what it was. I just thought it was normal that everybody had the abilities that I had. I saw those that had crossed over. I could talk to animals. They listened to me. I had a communication with animals. And I saw those that had crossed over. That was a big thing. I also heard in my head. So over the years, I came to know that I was clairvoyant, I was clairaudient, and clairescent. That means I can feel and hear and smell and have all those senses. But my very first thing that happened to me that I recall was when I was 5 years old. I was sitting in front of my grandmother's house in Watonga, Oklahoma, and I heard a voice behind me. Now, have you know that my mother was sitting on the porch behind me, but this was a male voice, and I was sitting with my feet in the road by an ant colony and an anthill, red ants, Oklahoma red ants, and I heard a voice say, "Don't do that, you're going to get stung." And I look all around because there's no men around, and the voice that I heard was a male voice. And I didn't listen. I kept my feet right there. And then one more time I heard, "Please move your feet. You're going to get stung," with a male voice. And I said, "Mommy, did you say something?" and then I found out later on, after I'd gotten stung, that the voice was someone I would hear, quite often. And his name is One Feather. He's my guide. And I came to know him over the years. And he's very prominent in my life, and he helps the others facilitate coming in to me so I can do readings, and so I can talk to those who've crossed over for family members. And if you ever saw the movie Ghost, where you have the Whoopi Goldberg sitting at that table, and you have the real people, and then you have the ones that have crossed over coming through the walls. That's very similar to what my life is like. And a friend of mine was actually the advisor on the movie Ghost. Her name was Char Margolis, and she advised how to make things look like the twinklies and the dark ones, and also what it looks like when they walk through walls, and so on and so forth. So I'm clairaudient, clairescent, clairvoyant. I'm a remote viewer. I jump time with my mind, and that's enough. That gets me through. And I've been doing it since I was 5.
Wow, since you were 5. I've got to go back to your description of things called twinklies and dark ones. What do you mean by that?
Well, the twinklies are the angels, and that's who comes and gets you when you're crossing over. They come with a family member, somebody that's in your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And the dark ones are those that take you to the void if you need to go to the void.
And what is the void?
The void is away from the light. It's darkness. It's whatever you imagine it to be that's not good. In heaven, where it's in heaven, everything is good. There's nothing. The polarity of the negative and the positive is not there. Everything is what you imagine it to be, and it is good.
What would facilitate somebody going to the dark?
A lot of suicides will go to the dark side because they don't. They've taken it out of the way things are meant to be. And if you go there for a suicide, you can be redeemed and pulled out of there through prayer to angels and so on and so forth. Everyone that goes to the dark side, or the dark, or the void, whatever you want to call it, it's just away from the light. And we're souls, we're spirits, we want to be in the light. However, there are some that are just dark. They don't have any light in them.
Okay. Because I've in the years of discussing life and death with people who are gifted in your way, so many different descriptions of exactly the same thing. And we'll stick with kind of the suicide side of things. You commit suicide, you cross, but a lot of them talk about a thing called the blue room.
Yes.
And the first part of the blue room is, these are all the things you've done in your life that cause pain or trauma or hurt someone else. And you have to feel everything you've done to those people and accept it.
It's a life review.
Yeah, a life review. But
excuse me, it's a life review. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
and it's a life review of the not pleasant things.
And you get to feel exactly how they felt. And at the end of that negative one, you get to say, yes, I agree, this is what I did. If you say, no, it wasn't me, then you just have to stay there. And then from that one, you get to do the positive one. And once you've felt all the good things you've done to people, then you kind of leave that and proceed out of the blue room area. So it's similar when you're talking about going to the dark. It's like, okay, you're not going to go, we don't skip everything and go right to the good stuff. You have to experience the negative that you caused. Actually,
I don't know about that. I've crossed 5 times. I've had 5 near-death experiences, and every single time I've had the near-death experience, except for one, I have gone through the tunnel, and I'm in the room, and there are family members there that have been with me before, and I just have not been able to go through the portal that goes into the light because I wasn't supposed to yet.
Yeah.
And I did not. I wanted to. I tried a couple times, and both times I was told, no, you need to come back. But the last near-death experience I had, I didn't even go over to the other side. I was asked, do I want to come home? And I wrote about this in my book, Living in the Moment. I was asked if I wanted to come home, and I said, I stammered a millisecond, and I said, I don't want, and I was going to say leave my children behind because they were in the car with me. Mm-hmm. And this is all happening as we're flipping over 5 times in a row down an embankment. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I wanted to go or not. At that second, there wasn't even seconds. It was just so fast, yet was in slow motion. I was shown a vision of futuristic events, and from that, the windshield went through me at that moment, and then the thing I said was, no, I can't leave my babies behind for that. The voice said, so be it, and everything went out of slow motion into, and it was over, and the car was upside down. The longest 5 seconds that I think I've ever had in my entire life was waiting to hear the sound of my children, thinking, oh my gosh, they went ahead and left, and I stayed. Oh, wow. And then I heard them. Then they came to. My daughter came to. My son was, crying for me. So that was an interesting event. However, I wasn't taken to the through the tunnel at that point. The other 4 times I went through the tunnel with my guide and with an angel, and all 4 of those times I went into a room. It was very beautiful. I was surrounded by people that met me, and then I was informed every single time, hey, it's not time. Hi, how are you? But you got to go back, and I would come back. So I don't know about that. I guess that, to be honest with you, that was blue there. Once you get through, it's a light color, a white color that is like a light blue, but it's so ethereal. And I always describe it when people ask me about this as luminescent wrapping paper. The one that is clear, but it has all of those colors in it. Mm-hmm. That's what that's like there. That's the colors that were surrounding me, and lots and lots of people, or souls there, not people, but souls. And so I don't know. I can't say. I've just only been told by those that I communicate with on the other side. I communicate with angels about that, and they've told me that the void is just darkness. You're in darkness. And whatever you imagine it as a soul to be is. Sort of like the movie What Dreams May Come, is where it shows when after she's committed the suicide, she's in their home, actually. She's creating all of that in her space of time that she's in, and it's just horrible. It's not the house. There's no water. There's no plumbing. The neighbors aren't around. It's a nightmare to her. And from what I've gathered, that's the way it is in the void. And also that you can be redeemed from it, though, from a suicide. Now, if you've murdered people and killed and done things that are just inhumane, as you're in this incarnate, in this carbon body that we're in, I think it might be different. I just don't know. I don't know because I've never experienced it. Not on any level have I experienced that, because I'm not that type of soul.
Yeah, we talk about sometimes somebody like Robin Williams who took his own life out of sequence, we'll call it, and he, with millions of fans around the world, he then had to feel the disappointment and the sadness they felt.
Remember, he was my friend.
Yes, I know. And
yeah, he was my friend.
he would then have to feel what everyone felt, but after that was done, he got to feel all the pleasure he gave people.
All the joy. Mm-hmm.
All the joy. So he dealt with all the oh crap, and then dealt with all the oh good. And my understanding, as long as you accept it, both of those as your doing and your own, that is the redemption. Does that make sense for you?
Yes, it absolutely makes sense. I believe he's redeemed, but then again, I'm not so sure he killed himself. So I've never really believed that. So I don't want to go into that on the air. However,
tease you. Yes.
Yeah, I don't really agree with everything. However, I will tell you, he gave the eulogy at my ex-fiance's funeral, and I will tell you, I met him so many times and around him so many times, and he was the funniest, lonely person I've ever met. He was lonely, and it was very hard for me to know that about him.
Yeah.
That he struggled with so much. He was the most loyal friend. If he was your friend, he was your friend until you died, and he was your friend till after you died. He was loyal. However, he was lonely in his mind. He had tons of people around him, but he had his wonderful children, but he was still lonely. And that, I don't know how else to describe that, but just lonely. Nothing was ever fulfilling to him because he was so out there, so fast, so quick, so knowledgeable of so many things, and yet he was so out of place. I just don't know even how to explain that. I told you about the time I first met him, correct? Have I ever told you that?
No.
Do you want to hear it real quick?
Yes.
Okay. I was at the Comedy Store on Sunset Strip, and I was with some friends, and we were friends with Sam Kinison, who was being very mean to me that evening. And he was saying things that were inappropriate. And
hold on. Sam Kinison was saying things that were inappropriate? I don't.
Yeah, imagine that.
Imagine that, yeah.
So, but he was saying to me, and I was actually one of his, in a group of people that he was friends with. And I told him that night, after his stuff that he had said, I said, you're going to have a really tragic end to your life. And it's not so far away, my friend. And he was like, oh, is that a psychic, reading? And I said, actually, it's the truth, and you can take it for what you want. And then look what happened to him. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I was 100% accurate. His, other people remembered that night. But anyway, that was a magical night as well, because I went through a door to go to the restroom because I'd gotten up and left the performance of Sam because I was on the front row and he was just attacking me. And so I got up to go to the restroom, and I walked through the wrong door. And it really wasn't a door, it was a curtain. And I walked through the curtain, and I just ran right into Robin Williams. And I went, I've never, James, ever been starstruck in my life because I've been around so many famous people. And I've never been starstruck. And at that moment, I was, and I said, oh, my gosh, you're Robin Williams. And I stuck out my hand, and he shook my hand, and I didn't let go of his hand. And he said, yes, I'm Robin Williams. And I said, oh, my, you're Robin Williams. He goes, we've established that. I'm Robin Williams. And then I said it again, and he goes, may I please have my hand back? And I said, oh, my. I said, oh, yes, I'm so sorry. I said, I love you in Mork and Mindy and so on and so forth, and I really enjoy your films, and I am happy to meet you. And so he goes, and he took his hand, and he kind of dusted his hand off. He goes, oh, so nice to have you back. Like that, and I felt awful. So I turned around, and he was in his rainbow suspenders and his pants, and he had performed on stage, but it was before we had come, because we had come to see Sam Kinison. So anyway, so that was the time I met him. And then, fast forward, I had met my husband-to-be and his best friend, and I went to a party at Mel Brooks's house with my husband-to-be. And lo and behold, who walks in but Robin Williams. And he walked right over to us. And I hadn't met him with my husband yet, but they were all friends because my husband and Jim were models in Los Angeles. And so he walks right over to us and he goes, "Never let that woman hold your hand." And he had remembered me. And it started a friendship for years. And I just loved him. He was the sweetest person. He was very good. Always your friend. Always. And he remembered, I introduced myself when I had a hold of his hand. I said, "Hi, I'm Marianne." And then when he saw me again, he said, "Never let this woman hold your hand." And then he knew my name. He knew who I was. It was crazy. And he was like that with so many people. He knew everyone. He knew their names. He never forgot you. Anyway, enough about Robin Williams. How did we get off on this?
I don't know, but I'm going to come back on something, something to do with this. Were you quite young at the time?
Yes, young and pretty.
Because I know I've got people, my listeners jumping up and down right now, screaming, it wasn't ethical to tell Sam Kinison that he was going to die just because you were angry at him.
I knew Sam Kinison very well. As a psychic, well, yes, but you had to understand what Sam Kinison did. He always wanted readings from me too, but if it was convenient for him. But he was
interesting.
Interesting, yes.
Yes,
he was interesting.
Sam
and I, and I just really wanted to. At that time, normally I didn't do stuff like that. However, with Sam, the things he had said, he humiliated me in front of an entire audience. And while I would love to be able to rise to the occasion and rise above everything, at that moment I didn't. And, and unfortunately, unfortunately I was correct in what happened to him.
Well,
he was not, let me see how to put this. Sam was an interesting person. I'll go back to the word interesting again. Yeah. Sometimes not the nicest person in the world. I mean, he definitely had his demons.
Yeah, he had a dark side.
Very, very dark. And it was totally, but so did Robin. Robin had a dark side as well. He just thought it differently than Sam did.
Mm-hmm.
Sam was different.
One of the things that I always found fascinated about you is that you could, if somebody actually ever agreed to this, well, and people have, I guess, in your life, you can tell them when they're going to die and how. Exactly.
And I learned a lesson, and I don't do that very often, and I use my higher judgment on that now. I've matured in that. Let me put it that.
Oh, good.
My gifts, I've matured with them. And I had a lady who was, her daughter and son-in-law are very famous, and so is she. And she bothered me about wanting to know when she and her husband were going to cross over. And so finally I said, "Are you okay with this?" And I got a gut feeling that she really wasn't. And she was a very forceful woman. And so I finally told her, and then she worried about it for years, and it bothered me that she worried about it so much. So I'm very careful with that now. I don't tell people because I'm usually pretty accurate on that. And one of my dear friends wanted to know about her father, and this happened in the last 5 years. And I told her, and he died on the exact day within about a 4-hour time frame of when I told her. So I am accurate about that, and I don't want to use that as a weapon, which is, shame on me. I did that with Sam, but he didn't believe me anyway. He didn't want to believe that. He was very, very careless, we'll say. So I learned from doing that reading with this one woman. Her son's in politics, and they own a lot of ketchup. We'll say that.
Yeah.
And the mother-in-law, I did the reading for her, and she wanted to know it, and I didn't tell her, and then she called me 2 weeks later and said, I really want to know this, and I said, I'm not going to tell you, and then she called me back a month later, and finally I thought, well, she really wants to know. She wouldn't be calling me this much and this often, and I went ahead and told her, and gosh, she worried about it forever. She spent more time worrying about that than she did living her life, and since I wrote the book Living in the Moment, that really bothered me because I want people to live in the moment and be present.
You and I had a conversation about 4 years ago, and you kind of jokingly said, well, wouldn't you want to know when you can check out and go through your bucket list? And it was the first time I heard about this, and I'm thinking, no, I really don't want to do that. And you do readings that your psychic readings aren't like they could go for a span. One reading could show a span of like a couple of years for somebody.
No. 15 years.
15 years? Well, that's a couple. So
yeah, that's a couple.
If I come in and say, I do not want to know when I'm going to die, this is it, do not tell me, and I have a reading that ends next Thursday at 3 o'clock, I went, oh, crap, I didn't go 15 years. I only went up to next Thursday at 3. So without telling me I'm going to die, I think you just told me when I was going to die. So if it goes for 15 years, but this is something I'll run by you. You probably, if somebody doesn't want to know when they're going to die, and that's a given, we'll call that a given. Your readings go for 15 years. Somebody comes in and wants one of these 15-year readings, and it only goes a year and a half.
I'm sorry. I don't. Some people, I only give a reading for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't have any control over that. I get what I get, because remember, I don't believe in time anyway.
Yeah, time.
Remember, we talked about that. I don't
man-made.
believe that time is real. I believe it's man-made. There's no such thing as time. Time's an illusion. So that's what I believe. So all I'm doing is giving those events that I can see out there in the ethereal realm. I can see events that are happening. It just so happens that I found out through, talking to people that I've read in the past. Remember, I only do one reading for a person ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And so when I talked to them in the future, quote, future, I found out that I had told them things, and it happened 15 years later.
Right.
That's how long I've known them.
And that's how it reaches out. That's where your ability reaches out to. 15 years. That is very
15 years.
We're talking to Marianne Morgan. Please go to her website, mariannemorgan.org. An amazing human being with an amazing psychic ability. You have this guide with you, this spirit, One Feather. Has he ever been terrestrial? Is he somebody from Earth, or is he a spirit being?
Actually, it's funny you'd ask that because, he checked out a while back, and an entity came in that was, I can't see them, but I know he's there, or it's there. I know it's there because of some things that have occurred with me. Now, one feather, it's one white feather too. One feather is back. However, the other one is still around. And that's an ET, an extraterrestrial. Okay. And I am not familiar with why this entity is around. However, I know that one feather took a step back, and this entity has been more present, we'll say. More present. Was very present.
It's the end of 2019 now, but when did that happen?
I think it was like 2016, 2017, right in there. Did we not talk about that one time? Did I not tell you about that?
I've talked to you about in 2015 to 2016, a number of very well-known psychics around the planet had ETs step in and their guides take a step back. And that happened. I guess it was around maybe 16 or 17, right in there. Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was right after the New Year. I know that. Whatever year that was. Yeah, it was fascinating. Joanna, the medium, used to be on our episode 2 Mediums in a Large that I had. she had a guy come in, and we just called him Rob. And Rob at one point said, "You can ask me anything you want, and as long as it wasn't conspiracy, like with 9/11, an inside job, all these other things." And I slipped in some JFK stuff on him, but he shut me down pretty quick. But we talked about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, Dogman, all these other things, and now we spent 3 hours going through, and he just answered questions. It was fascinating, and then I think he's moved off, and Joanna's got her other guides back. But Rob is always there. He's like in the background. There's always this. But they've come in, the ETs, came into many, many people. And my understanding is you actually have a choice when they show up. Okay, I'm coming in right now. And you go, you know what? My guides, we're busy doing this. So you guys hang back. But they stepped in, and my understanding is they're there for something that is coming.
It's larger.
That's larger for humanity. And being that...
Because if there is because if there is a big thing, a big event that happens, I won't be leaving after that.
Correct.
And I have to be able to be very knowledgeable of things and guide people.
Yeah, and that's
guide
the important
souls that are
part.
here still.
Over time, thanks to these paranormal television shows coming on 10, almost 20 years ago now, people are understanding that there is possibly something after death, therefore legitimizing the work that you do and people like you have done for years. So as that belief system, they check off that, it's okay to listen to a psychic. The ETs are coming through because they say, okay, the psychics are a conduit to humanity now. So
I believe that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But White Feather, it sounded really cool because I found out in June through a channeling for Skeeter, a friend of mine, we were doing. We were down at Alien Con and came back to this Airbnb, and she started doing a channeling about my spirit guide, my primary spirit guide, and I find out that my primary spirit guide is, in fact, my higher self, which is an ET.
Oh, which is an ET. Yeah.
Which was like, I'm like, what? I am my spirit guide? Well, yes and no. It's like, it was just like the snake eating its tail, kind of the circle that just kept going. It's like, how did I, and I had my spirit guide described to me at one time as a fellow that looked like he was from Egypt 30,000 years ago. And the psychic who was telling me this, it went right over both of our heads, that said that he'd never been terrestrial, which didn't click that he was outside of the earth. And because I asked what his name was, and she said he's laughing because, why do we always ask their names? But I just call him Matthew.
That's true.
And then and he and we just went on, and I had one of those photographs taken by a friend of mine who's got a machine made from this guy in California made these machines, and it shows kind of colors and spirits in the background, alleged spirits. So I thought, okay, I don't know if it was like a parlor trick or whatever. So I had this little Polaroid taken, and a shaman friend of mine, Derek, White Sky Cloud, walks by the table, and he looks at it and goes, "Oh, your spirit guides are ETs." I went, "What? What did you see in that photo?" And he goes, "It's an ET. Your spirit guide is not from here." And then I went, "Oh, not being terrestrial, that's what she meant by that." And then kind of just forgot all about it until I went on this journey, almost like a past life regression, to a planet. Walk down it was a really cool thing. Found a place where I had a chair, an area in this like library area with everybody else, and it was
in the Great Hall. In the Great Hall.
Yeah, it was the Great Hall. And as I got there, I come down from the sky onto this what looked like a completely other planet, over the water onto a pier, and then down under the forest in what looked like basically the size of a shopping mall, with people walking on the right side going down and the left side coming up. And I knew there was stuff to the side, like if you were in a mall, there'd be stores. And I walked down, and I described myself as being very tall and high cheekbones and kind of a nose that was poked up a little bit, bald, whatever clothing I had on. And then went into this area where there was like 2 or 3 small levels of great big armchairs. And
yes. Uh-huh.
And they looked like they could have been made out of marble or something hard, but everything was rectangular and square. And I said, well, there's an empty chair there. And Skeeter said, well, what do you have to do? And I said, I have to go sit in it. And she said, why? And I said, because it's mine. So I went and sat in this thing, and then everything just relaxed. And then I got up and walked out and flew back. It was the weirdest thing. And she said, yeah, who are you? And I said, I am my higher self. And she said, and who is that? I said, I am my guide. And she said, interesting.
And I believe that.
Yeah, which was bizarre.
Once again, about the time, I don't believe in past lives. I believe everything is happening at the same time because it's eternity. And how can there's no beginning and there's no end. So if it's all happening at the same time and we go to these other places, it's really hard for most humans to comprehend it. However, it's not time. It's eternity. So it's there, like I said, no beginning, no end. Everything is happening at the same time. The Holocaust is happening at the same time as something that is, quote, in the future. It's already happened.
Yeah.
It's all happening at the same time because of the way the universe is. I call it life hoods. So you're stepping into life hoods that you have to be able to get the information and feel those things that you feel here in this reality, because this reality is a tangible reality. It's one of the few tangible realities where you can smell, taste, hear, see things. And then you take everything that you get from this reality and you take it back to the universe side. But you've done that in other, quote, spaces and time, and that it's like what I put it at when I'm giving speeches. It's like a flower. The center of the flower is the universe, and you go out away from the center of the flower to create the petals. And all these life hoods are like the petals on a flower, and they're all the same, but yet they're all different. And every petal is a different set of experiences, but yet it all goes back to the center.
Oh, okay.
It's connected to the center. And that's a life hood. Those petals are like life hoods. And you go out, you experience it in different dimensions, different realities, and then you bring it back to the universe with everything that it is, everything you've done and experienced in that reality, in that life hood, and it expands upon the knowledge, and then it goes back in on itself, and it expands and goes back in, and it learns. It's learning. God is learning from us.
Interesting.
We're part of the Creator. Yeah, so we're just little.
We're just playing little parts in the big film. Yeah.
Yeah,
now,
that's exactly right.
When you were actually tested on your psychic abilities by a guy named Dr. Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona, the Human Energy System Lab, how did you find yourself there? How did that occur?
It was very strange. My son, who was 4 years old at the time, saw Dr. Schwartz on television and said, "Mommy, you're supposed to talk to that man." and then I was working on different cases with police departments, and he and Dr. Schwartz saw those and got in touch with me through his a young lady named Sabrina called me. They had gotten my phone number from law enforcement, and I got with them and talked to Dr. Schwartz, and we did a whole series of testing for years, actually. We did several different studies, blind studies, that were, first we did a study where there was someone sitting behind a drape, and I did a reading for that person, never meeting, not knowing if it's a man or a woman, because there was another person that would sit there and say, shake their head yes or no, and that was a woman. And I had to say whether this was a man or a woman, and all their experiences, which I was quite successful at. And then we went into a triple blind where the other person was in a different part of the world. Now, this was one of the final ones that I did. It was a triple blind. The other person was in Scotland, actually. There was someone on the phone with that person who was on the phone in Tucson sitting next to me. So wow. I read the person that was in Scotland that wasn't on the phone. I read that person.
And when you say you read them, it's kind of talking through your system of communicators to their guide and then getting information that no one else would have known? Or did you actually do a reading like a client would walk into your house and do a reading? Or was it specifically a way to identify the person? Is that what you were getting, just the identity?
No, to be honest with you. I was in a dark room with all the electrodes and everything on my head, and we were filming this. This was being filmed for Discovery Channel. And Dr. Schwartz walked into the room and he said, well, how's it going, sister? What do you think? And I said, oh, it's a woman. She's in, and now remember, they didn't tell me what part of the world that this person was in. I knew nothing about this. I said, they told me that she's in Scotland. Her daughter died in a Miata, a red Miata. Her daughter's name was Olivia. Blam, bam, bam. Dr. Schwartz said, what are you doing? He goes, you got to do this on the TV and everything and make it. I said, I can't help it. I said, do you actually believe you're in control of this? Yeah. And he just looked at me and went, oh, yeah. He goes, and he had never thought of it like that. I said, you're not in control. There's no such thing as control. They're telling me stuff now. And I said, and when I went in there and I did it, I said, before I ever got here, they were already telling me about this woman in Scotland. And this was all verified through the TV network that this was happening. So they knew right away that I knew. And then I went on and I told her things that I had not said to Dr. Schwartz. I mean, I told her that, somebody shot her mother and in front of her. Or, there was other things that were in this reading. It was an hour reading. So there was many, many things. And what I'd done, that her daughter wanted to talk to her. And I let her daughter talk. I facilitated it where her daughter got to talk to her. By the end of the thing, she was crying, because it was so emotional for her. So that was one of the more interesting readings that I ever did, or one of the more interesting studies. I believe on my website that is published in an article as well. I think if people go to that, there's an actual article about that event that happened. Plus, it was on, I believe it was Discovery or A&E. I can't remember which one it was. It was a few years ago. That was always very interesting. I always get to laugh because John Edwards, Alison Dubois, Mary Ochoa, there were a whole slew of psychics that were studied, and I was 92% accurate, and John was only 89. So we had a little bit of competition going, So yeah, it was with the accuracy level that it's just, Dr. Schwartz described it one time. He said, when people say that this is not random and that there's no way of saying that it's not hokey, he goes, Marianne, yeah, she can tell you owned a dog, okay? Well, that's pretty normal, right? That a lot of people own dogs. But he said, but Marianne can go on and tell you on Saturday, August 17th, you went to PetSmart and got your poodle painted purple and bought a polka dot skirt that was pink for that poodle. And the year was 19 1999 or 2005. He said that's how precise she is with her explanation of things. So he said, "Tell me how she does that." That's the way he said he would go. Tell me how she does that, because that is not fixable. That she can tell you that. And I had done that on the on that show where we did the triple blind, where the woman's daughter was killed in the red car in the car wreck. So those details were just so accurate. There was just no way that it could be fixed. There's no way.
That is very cool.
I think that was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. We're talking to Marianne Morgan again. Go to her website, mariannemorgan.org. Hey, before I move on to the next part, I've got a meeting today. You don't have to do the reading on the meeting. But what I've planned to do with I have a Patreon account for people who like the show. And I ask people if you want to donate $3 a month. And then I have draws every month for a psychic reading, a past life regression, and an astrological chart. Did my first draw in September 15th, and I'm coming up October 15th. The 15th of the month I'll be drawing. And what I want to do when I've only maxed it, there's only room for 3,500 people. Which, if you think about it, at $3 a month, that's a lot of money. So what I'm doing is I'm sending people on trips. Once I get up to 2,222 people, just pick that number randomly, and then I'll give away trips to locations. Like if you like ghosts, they'll send you to Gettysburg. If you like UFOs, you can go to Sedona and look at UFOs, those kind of things. So what I'm planning on doing is that it's basically $3 a month is $36 a year. If people donate just the one time $36. And I draw names from that, we get up to that number and I draw names. I've got a friend of mine who produces documentaries and he makes films and will actually take two people, and if they like ghosts, we will actually go to a very famous location and film 1 hour episode of a paranormal investigation where they are the main people, stars in it. You think that's kind of a cool idea?
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, so
that's really great. That sounds like so much fun. Are you asking me if I think that this will be a go?
No, because I'm afraid you might say no.
It will be a go. It will be successful.
Good. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about at the meeting today, and it's so if literally if you like UFOs, I would send you to the UFO conference down in Phoenix. And you and another person, airfare, accommodation, all the VIP passes to listen to all the lectures, then drag you kicking and screaming up to Sedona, which is 2 hours north, take you out with Melinda Leslie and do the UFO tours, but film it all as an episode, a 1 hour episode that'll be out on YouTube. So,
that is wonderful. I think that's great. Now, are you talking about taking them to MUFON? Is it MUFON or is it a different one?
It's called I just picked that one out of the blue because it was in Phoenix and it was close to Sedona. And that's the International UFO Congress. And yes. So it's a big conference, and they get to go. There are haunted locations from Galveston, Texas, to New York, to Florida, to L.A., and there are locations that people may have seen in these paranormal TV shows that we could actually get into. Because honestly, I'm retired and I don't have a mortgage. I don't need the money. But I want to travel. I want to travel to these places too. And to do that,
so it's good.
If I get people to donate and I get to draw their names, there could be some times where I'll draw two names and have 4 people show up, depending or go on a Bigfoot expedition in the Pacific Northwest, up in the Olympic Peninsula for a weekend or two. I just want to do that. So it's kind of helping people check off their bucket lists for paranormal and supernatural kind of things. And it sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. So
I think it sounds like it's wonderful. And I think that's wonderful. And hey, listen, if you need me to do a reading for somebody in order for them to benefit this in the future, I will donate a reading for you. Oh,
excellent. Maybe I will hit you up on that for the October or November readings that are coming up and pick one of those for you. That'd be great.
I'd love to do that.
We're talking to Marianne Morgan. Please go to our website, mariannemorgan.org, and there's no E on Ann. It's just Marianne like normal.
Maryann.
Yes, not pretentious Marianne, just regular Marianne Morgan. .org. You've written a book, Between Heaven and Earth. Tell me a little bit about that.
And Between Heaven and Earth is a book that's not released yet, but it's going to be. It's just people have asked me questions, and it was similar to just one question. They've asked me questions what it's like between here and heaven, and I have made 30 chapters of different, I don't know how to put it. It's different elements and different areas between here and heaven. And it's from questions that people ask me, and so I've answered their questions, and that's what it is. It's very informative, and I took the questions and answered them as best I could from what I was told from those on the other side. I didn't answer the questions myself. I allowed it to come through me, and then I put what they said down on paper.
And that's the very cool part, because it's not ask Marianne, it's ask, one white feather, what's going on, what's going to happen, or how things work.
Right. It's literally, I really just channeled it back through as to what to write. It wasn't me writing it. Let me put it that way. I'm not the one that wrote the words down. And I don't even believe I'm actually the one that really picked the questions and or the title. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was all, just pushed right on through me. I was just the vessel. Let me put it to you like that. I was just the vessel.
When does that come up?
See, I wrote just one question, just one more question, and just one final question. I have all 3 of those books ready to go with the questions that people sent to me through emails, right? And I answered all those questions the same way. And then Between Heaven and Earth, I have that done as well. And just waiting for the right time to put them all out. I haven't put them out there yet. Mm-hmm. You were going to ask me something else?
Oh, I've got an entire show to ask you questions about. No, I was just wondering when those are going to come out. But if you haven't been told when to release them yet, then that's
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, after you're working with police, or during your working with police, it's you were determined. What's the term that I'm looking for? The word I'm looking for. You were kind of referred to as an analytical intuitive profiler, which is a fancy way of saying a psychic detective. You worked on cases like Lacy Peterson, Natalee Holloway, Caylee Anthony. We can talk a little bit. And there was also what was the name? The Desert Rose, the lady.
Loretta Bowersaw. That was episode 1, I think, of the TV series Psychic Detective. You get asked by family and law enforcement and government to do quite a few things, and the government asks you to do things that we're not even allowed to talk about here. You were saying, you gave me a bit of a heads up off air. You were contacted about a week ago about a person who's been missing for 3 years. Can you talk about that? I can talk about it a little bit. I'm getting ready to go to Georgia. This person was on just went out spur of the moment, borrowed a kayak from his brother, and wanted to learn how to kayak. 3 days later, this was the second time he'd gone out. First time he went out, he went in a small area to learn how to kayak, and was seen there. The second, about a couple weeks later, he went out with the kayak again, the paddles, his little booty shoes that you wear, when you're in a kayak, and a life jacket, and was never seen from again, never heard from. They found the kayak, the paddles, 3 days later. They've never found the life jacket or the shoes. They found a receipt knowing that he'd eaten at Chick-fil-A that day, that somebody found it in the trash can at a specific cove. And I have coordinates that I was given from the other side, and major details. And so the family is flying me to Georgia, and I'm going to go look in a specific place. Now, I know I'm not going to find him, and I've told them that. They know that. However, I'm going to give them the details about how it's going to happen. And in about March of this next year, something will break about that case. But they want me to come there. And so I've told them I don't have to be there. I can remote view it. I don't have to see it. They want me to come because basically they want to talk to him, which we did a few days ago. They spoke with him, and we know he's definitely crossed over because I told them details about things that he wanted them to know. And so I'm going to be flying to Georgia to go do that, you know, and bring some closure to them because they have been living a little nightmare for the last 3 years. So that's one of the wonderful things that I get to do is bring closure to families. Now, the real closure will come when the events happen, and it'll be March or April this next year. Those will be the things that really bring the closure. However, I'm putting them on a path to closure, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I've
worked on a lot of those cases. Yeah, Lacy Peterson's mother called me. I talked to her, and Lacy told me a snake killed me, and I'm where the snakes are. And she was found in Morro Bay, with the Morro eels. You know, the eels.
The Morro eels,
her, her little boy, Morro eels. Yeah, so that happened, and then Natalee Holloway. Obviously, I'm friends with. Sorry about that. I had a call come in just then. I am friends with the Holloways to this day. Texas EquiSearch had enlisted my services to come to the island of Aruba. I met the family. I worked diligently with them. However, like Joe Scarborough said, well, if you had so many pages of notes that Natalee gave you, why can you not find her? And I said, well, she's unfindable. That's why. And I've shared that with Mr. Holloway and his wife and her mother. I can only help you to a point. If there's no body to find, then you can't find it, if that makes sense. She was in the ocean. The ocean's a very large place.
Yeah.
And then as far as the Anthony case, you know, I had told Tim Miller had called me and said, can you come to Florida and help me with this? And I said, well, why would I do that when somebody has already called in about where the body is for this little girl? And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, somebody's already called 911 and told them where the body is. And he's like, no one's called. And I said, no, Tim, somebody's called. The body's in a plastic bag. It's in an area where there's snakes and alligators, and it's very, you're not going to get to it. So I just let it go for a minute. And he goes, well, we're not going to find her. And I said, no, you're not going to find her. And I said, and she's lying to you about everything. The woman's a liar, okay? And then it come to find out that meter reader had seen a black bag, which he thought looked bizarre, and it was in the swampy area. And then when the swamp water went down, he actually went and looked at it because he'd been going by this bag forever, and nobody had, picked it up, looked at it, investigated, or whatever. So indeed, he had called, and I was 100% accurate about that. And Tim Miller will tell you that if you ask him. And it was her body in that bag. Of course, it was really hard for me when several police dogs, which are considered to be police officers, hit a car for cadaver, and they're cadaver dogs, and they hit the car and say, in their language, which is sitting or however they alert, that this car had a dead body in it for more, it had a body in it. And when their testimony is thrown out of court and they are police officers and somebody is acquitted of something like that, well, I have a problem with that. However, it wasn't meant to be. No. And so, that was the way that circumstance played out. So I had to look at it and say, well, for whatever reason, some people don't face justice here in this reality.
In this reality.
Yes, so that one I worked on that one. And then, of course, I worked on the Loretta Bowersock case in Arizona where...
Could I go back really, I want to touch on what you said about the Lacy Peterson one, where her husband was charged and convicted of her murder. When she came to you...
And he's on death row.
Yeah, she wasn't killed by a snake, correct?
No, she was killed by him. She considered him to be a snake.
That's what it was. Okay, because when you first said it, she was killed by a snake. And I was thinking, hold on, that wasn't how she died. So, yeah, just to clarify, he was the snake that killed her.
She said he's a snake. She compared him to a snake. I'm where the snakes are. And she was in Morro Bay, where the eels, Morro eel,
Go
ahead.
Were you contacted by somebody in the family, or did she show up at your house saying, hey, I'm dead, could you go help me out here?
No, somebody in the family contacted. A cousin put me in touch with the mother. Yeah.
Do you ever get the ones where
facilitated that?
Do you ever just get the ones where the spirit shows up and says, look, hey, I'm dead, could you tell my parents?
Natalee Holloway did that.
Oh, she did?
Natalee Holloway, yes, I had no idea they were going to call me. Natalee Holloway had shown up in my bedroom days before they ever called me. I already had it all written down. And then it just played out, boom, 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 where they called me, and I was on a plane within a day going to Aruba, where I had never, I had kids in school and in summer camp, and at the time I believe it was summer camp. That was at the end of the school year for graduation. It was a senior trip that she had gone on. So that's how that happened. So my kids were just getting out of school, and they called me, and I was on a plane, and actually a football player sent a private plane for me.
Oh, cool.
On that's how that happened. Yeah, and I went down there and I did as much as I could. I was actually with Dave Holloway at the prison when he and Jorn Vandersloot, Paul Vandersloot's father, Jorn Vandersloot's father, Paul Vandersloot, had they locked hands and didn't let go of each other's hands for 45 minutes because they were just, engaged in conversation, and Dave Holloway wasn't going to let him out of anything. And the last thing he said to Dave was so telling to me. He said, and this is a quote, he said, "You should know that you as a father of Natalee Holloway would do anything for your child, and I as the father of Jorn Vandersloot will do anything for my child."
Yeah.
And I looked at Dave and I go, well, that tells us everything we need to know.
Yeah, that's a clue.
A big, you think?
Yeah,
that one was a big one. Your daughter was dying, and I helped my son dispose of her body. Was basically that was the biggest clue of all. So anyway, go ahead.
And you knew, I think, didn't you indicate that the suspect was not going to be free forever?
Oh, yes. Yes, I told the investigator. They have a different system down there, and it's not like a detective. It's like they're called investigators or corporals.
Inspectors.
Basically. Inspectors, yes. It's sort of like what you had up in Canada, how it's the Mounties, and it's different. I was in a room with her, and she was, quizzing me. And I said, what about the woman that he raped on the cruise ship? And what about the girl he raped? Because I knew about all these. She goes, how do you know about these things? And I said, excuse me? Seriously?
I'm a psychic. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been brought in here to take care of. And you're asking me this? And I said, and let me just tell you a little secret, sister. I said, this isn't going to be the only time. This guy's going to kill again. And the next time, I said, how did I say it? Let me see. This guy's going to kill again. And one of these times, he is going to get caught by a much more powerful person than Daddy. And Daddy won't even be here to help him. And sure enough, he killed the young lady in Peru, whose father was the vice president of the country. And Paul Vandersloot had died of a heart attack on a tennis court. So, and then you had his mother, who just blew my mind. As Dave Holloway and I were standing there, his mother's like, "Oh, my son would never do anything. I asked him when I got off the plane, did you do anything to hurt this young girl, this beautiful girl?" And my little baby told me, "No, Mom, I would never," exact words, "No, Mommy, I would never hurt any girls."
Right.
And yeah, I was like, oh my Lord. And, he's such a great athlete. He's such a good soccer player. He's this and that and everything. And I'm thinking to myself, lady, you're a psychopath for a child. And, and he is like a serial killer. And this, what is going on here? Because you have no clue. And finally, after he killed the girl in Peru, which, by the way, it's also thought that he killed 2 or 3 girls in Colombia, and he killed somebody over in the Orient. So it's not the first, and he wasn't the last. He was, she was not the last one she was the last one he killed because he's been in prison, but she wasn't. There were others before her, besides Natalee.
Yeah,
he went from raping people to actually killing them, and trying to get rid of their bodies. So what is that was just wow. He really stepped over that line. And
there's a lot of lines that he jumped over willingly. Yeah,
yes, very much so. He stuffed her into a suitcase and was trying to leave the hotel with her in the suitcase. Yeah.
And it's interesting from when I talk to a number of psychics who do investigative work, a lot of times they'll say what you just said in regards to your new case in Georgia and other things that you and I have talked about before, but you will see where the deceased is, the remains are, and you will get the information that the police aren't going to find them, the family won't find them, because it's not on our karmic path, or their karmic path at that time to find them. So if we touch on the Loretta Bowerstock story, was that in Nevada where she was?
No, that was in Arizona. And when she was put in the desert, buried in a shallow grave by Todd Benderly, who was her live-in boyfriend, quote, business partner. All he did was suck the money away from her. When she was murdered by him and put in the desert, one of the things I had said on television was that when somebody found her, it was a woman who is hiking with 2 other people in the desert that will find her, because her daughter, God love her, Terry Bowersock, wanted so much to find her mother. She would go out in the desert and search, and actually was searching near where her mother was by about 2 miles. It just wasn't the right place, because it wasn't for Terry to find her. Mm-hmm. It was for the other woman. And that happened exactly like I said. I said she would sit down on her skull, and that is what happened. And oh my goodness, I cannot imagine sitting down on someone's rock, what I think to be a rock, and then looking down and seeing like tarp, garbage bag tarp, plastic. Mm-hmm. And looking down and seeing that, oh my God, this is somebody's face and somebody's eyes, eye sockets or whatever. That's pretty gruesome. And to be in the desert on top of it, I'll never forget what one of the detectives told me, that because when I worked on the case with him, he said when he was driving up to where her grave was, he remembered that I told him that I saw blue all around within about 100 feet of where she was. Blue walls, just this very specific blue. It's like a powder blue. I couldn't describe it any more than this. I just saw blue everywhere. And I heard children laughing and swinging and going in circles to where it would make you sick. Okay? And I said, I just hear these children laughing from a time, when he drove up. There was an abandoned blue motel in the middle of the desert. There was a merry-go-round and a swing set, and when he walked back there, the breeze was blowing the swing set, the little chair in the swing set where a little child would sit, like a baby chair. And he said, and it was blowing in the wind, and it was going, that making that, a squeaky sound. And he said it all flashed back to him what I had told him about the children and hearing their laughter. And he said it was so eerie that he could almost hear the laughter himself and the giggling and the happiness of a child, yet he knew he was walking to the grave of this woman who had been murdered. So he told me it was probably one of the most vivid times in his life where he knew and came to the realization that my gift was real, because there's no way I would have known that about that blue motel and the swing set and the merry-go-round. And then who was going to find her? And it was absolutely accurate. He told me he would never doubt me again. I said, well, that's okay. So that was fine. You had mentioned Analytical Intuitive Profiler. That was a while ago. That was a name given to me by an FBI agent, actually, because she couldn't use the word psychic.
Oh, yeah, I guess it wouldn't look great in their paperwork.
No, as an asset. No, because I was considered an asset, so she named me an Analytical Intuitive Profiler. I thought that was clever, actually.
Yeah, you should get a coat, an AIP on the top, on the back of it. One of those blue windbreakers with yellow AIP. Analytical Intuitive. Yeah. Working with the FBI. It's all these other acronyms. I guess the guy who killed Loretta Bowerstock, Todd Benderly, he committed suicide.
Mm-hmm. And I had told them, the detectives, I said, you're going to lose all your information, because if you don't get to him and put him in jail, he's going to kill himself. And by the time they drove over there to pick him back up again, he had already hung himself in the garage by the van with the pickaxe in it, into where he had picked the rock, and the tarp was actually on, not in the vehicle. It was actually in the garage on like a workbench. And when I walked in there, I said, oh, well, this is what she's wrapped in, this tarp right here. And Sure enough, they kept samples of it. And then when she was found, that tarp was matched.
What do you think it is in the karmic cycle for the people who found her remains, or for the people who are tasked karmically to be the ones to find the remains of a murdered person?
I just think it's something they signed on to before we come here. Before you come here into this reality, you sign up for everything that's going to happen to you. Then whether you carry it out or not is what you go back and review. So it's all planned out before you get here. That is the predestination, and the free will is whether you carry out all the stuff that was predestined to happen, or if you go off and veer off and do something totally different.
Do you think there could be possibly a soul connection between the deceased, the murderer, and the person who found them? Something that they've always, in multiple incarnations, have always kind of, let's say, swam in the same pool, hang out in the same circles?
Yeah, I would think, because we're soul groups, I would assume that there's some kind of psychic paybacks or, karmic paybacks. Like, you helped me there in this lifetime, so I'm going to help your family in this lifetime, and I'll be the one to find your body, or remnants, or something that lets us know what happened. Yeah, on this, but that goes not just for that case. That goes for how do you explain somebody that just is goes in and gives a kidney so somebody can live,
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of things. Somebody that in the entertainment industry, let's take that one for example. You have people that turn down movies that are blockbuster movies, right? But if they would have done the movie, it might not have been a blockbuster. With somebody else's karma to do it and be the Raiders of the Lost Ark, for instance. Harrison Ford, he's got a lot of those stories. Marlon Brando. There were movies that if somebody else would have done them, they wouldn't be what they are. And then again, those guys had movies that they turned down, and if they would have done them, Burt Reynolds was really one that had turned down a lot of movies that became really huge hits. Because if you think about it, Burt Reynolds didn't have as many. He had a lot of movies, but some of them weren't as big as some of them could have been.
Yeah,
and some of the other ones that he had turned down. So yeah, he turned down Star Wars, and Harrison Ford did. That's just an example of karmic, and I believe that is actually very accurate. If somebody is supposed to find a body and that helps the family, then that might be a way of them bringing closure to that family. Well, that's what's supposed to happen in Georgia in the next year.
Just the closure. It's
the closure.
The Band-Aid. The ripping the Band-Aid off.
No, it takes off the Band-Aid.
Yeah,
it takes off the Band-Aid, and it has a way. It has the beginning of a healing, because as long. That's a really bad club to belong to, the club of somebody that's missing, for a parent or friends or whatever, because the unknown of what happened to that child or that person is 10 million times worse than the person being gone and you knowing what happened. It's just unbearable for parents. When, because that's a big part of what I do. I try to find missing children. And that is just one club I do not ever want to belong to, although it's hard for me to belong to it. It's just,
because you always know.
I see it, because I pretty much know. I don't want to belong to that club.
My father, from the age of 18 to the age of 22, was basically in the Second World War. And he got back home in 1944. He's 22 years old. He got a phone call from another lady in town whose son was also in the same Air Force, the squadron that my father was in. He was a gunner in a B-25 bomber out of England and bombing around the coast of France. And one of his mates in the same squadron, his plane got hit directly by flak, blew up, and burst into flame and crashed. And none of the people on the plane were ever found. It was completely obliterated. And the lady phoned my dad up, and my dad's living at his mom's house, moved back home right after he got back, got a phone call from the mother of this missing person, who said asked my dad, "Why did you come home and my son didn't?" Can you imagine my dad going, like, he's only 22, even though at 22, after 4 years of dealing with that stress, he grew up a lot. But the guilt that he felt, it was he didn't think about it at the time, but she handed him survivor's guilt on a platter. Why did you come home? What's so special about you? What's not special about my son? And her son, just literally, she saw him on the train station. He went off and never returned. And there was no record of him ever being found. It's that bizarre twist of karma. Like this lady who's lost her son is spinning in her life because she doesn't know where he is. And he'd been gone for 2 years before my dad came home. He had gone missing 2 years before he came home. But that was how she tried to deal with it, but it was asking... Actually,
that was very cruel.
Yeah. Oh, it was,
cruel.
Yeah.
It wasn't very nice. No, that wasn't very nice. I had a little story. A friend of mine, he's passed on now. His name was W.D. Haithcock, and I actually just went to the cemetery to make sure that there was a flag on his grave, and there wasn't. And so I was getting ready in the next few days to go get one and put one on his grave, because he was in the war with the Japanese, and he was on a ship, and they were firing at the beach, right? And he said it was so beautiful, the way it was, the rockets were going off, and it was just looked like fireworks. And he was young at the time, and he was a frogman, which is now a Navy SEAL, and that they were called frogmen. So he was sitting, and they were on the deck, and they were watching all these rockets go off, and he was standing next to his best friend, and all of a sudden they started shooting back at them, and he got hit in the shoulder, and his friend got hit and killed right next to him. And when I say right next to him, I mean they were, 6 inches away from each other. And he died, and WD got shot in the shoulder and got a Purple Heart. So those questions for people that are in that circumstance, they're trying to deal with things in their mind. And something similar happened to my son when he was in Iraq. A friend his got killed, and they had just traded places. So my son traded places, and 5 minutes later an IED went off and blew everything that my son had just been in up. So when it's your time to leave, and you planned it before you ever got here with the Creator, and then when it's not, it's not. And those are two examples, my son for one, WD for the other, and your dad. And people in their not understanding the realness of the reality and that it's basically an illusion. And the fact that when we leave and go to the other side, that's really home. When they have all of these experiences that they're having here, some of them are very brutal experiences and very harsh experiences, and they don't know how to handle them. And so one of the ways they do is they lash out at other souls, which is hard. Yeah. That's all I have to say about that one. I'll be a Forrest Gump, and that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it's it is interesting though, the near misses we go through in life. I've been almost killed a number of times. I was in a car accident when I was 16, April Fool's Day, early morning on a Sunday.
Really?
There was 2 children killed who were in the other car.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first full-on ghost apparition. I wasn't really hurt that bad, but they took me to the hospital anyway. And I was in the front of the ambulance while the driver and some people who were in my car were in the back of the ambulance. They park at the hospital. The nursing staff comes over and helps the driver out. He was, had a head injury or something. That's about it. And they helped him away, and his son was with him, and his son looked fine. And then later on, my parents told me that the boy had died. And I looked at them and said, well, he looked fine to me. He must have been internal injuries. And they just stared at me because he actually died in the car.
And he's with his dad.
I described him from head to toe, walking behind his dad as his dad was being led away. After that accident, I'd gone back. There was a 4-way stop in our town, and it was a bit backed up. So I cut through a 7-Eleven parking lot and turned right through. Instead of waiting to my turn to turn right at the stop sign, it was quicker for me to just cut through the parking lot and come out on the other end. So those little things that I thought about for years, if I hadn't have done that, if I had slept in 2 more seconds, if I woke up 2 seconds earlier, I kept going back in the time. What did I need to do to have missed? Because it was an uncontrolled intersection and a big hedge on my left side, which was on his right side. And I was doing, I think the speed limit was 25 miles an hour, and I was doing 30. And he was doing about 45 or 50 coming from my left. So I didn't even see him until we were in the middle of the intersection, and I broadsided. I was driving my dad's old, he had a second car we used to take over to a cabin we had, an old 62 Ford Meteor, which is built like a tank. And this guy had a little 74 Envoy, which was built out of like Coors Light cans, and it just
aluminum
around the whole front end of my car. And his one child was killed instantly, another one died in hospital the next day, and another kid had a broken leg. And he was fine because my car hit the back end or the more of the passenger side rear end of the car. But it wrapped it like around the thing, spun us around. And I just kept thinking it was that split second. If I had added a split second or had taken off a split second in my day, we would have missed. So
right, but it wasn't meant to be that way. It was meant to be.
Yeah.
There's nothing you could do. I mean, that was one of those ones that was meant to be. And you know, and does it bother you?
Does it bother me? I don't know if it bothers me. It bothered me a lot as a kid because people would kept pointing it out to me. Oh my God, I feel so bad about what happened. And like the principal of my high school came by and said, oh, you know, here's a letter from the staff, and we all feel so bad. So their feeling bad for me made me feel bad. But I did have an out-of-body experience. I remember running up the steps of a lady's house to get some help. She opened the door, screamed, and ran right past me. And then in hindsight, now I can see she actually ran through my left shoulder and down the stairs. And because I turned around and looked where she was going, and I could see myself standing at the car. Again, this all comes to me years later, because at the time it wasn't really clicking that I couldn't have been seeing myself standing beside the car. And I wasn't injured that much, but for some reason I jumped out, and I was standing beside the car. I was just standing there looking, staring.
You were in shock.
Yeah, so I was, but my body, or my inside of my soul, my spirit, or whatever that wasn't in shock, ran up to ask for help.
Right. Yeah.
Very strange.
Your higher
Very,
self.
very strange.
Once again, your higher self.
Yeah, which is, my higher self should have been paying attention driving.
You were young. You were young and inexperienced.
Yes, just 16. They'd only been driving since August the previous year. Good Lord. And the silliest thing is we were trying to, we'd been out the night before, and I lost my wallet. So my buddies and I were going to go down to the beach we were at and grab my wallet. And sure enough, it was there the next time we went down and looked. So it was the weirdest thing. We are talking to Marianne Morgan. If you want a reading from young Marianne, please go to her website, mariannemorgan.org. Read some testimonials about her, read about Just One Question, and keep an eye out for her books coming out, because I'm going to be nagging her about having those things printed. Yeah, it talks a little bit. If you go into the psychic detective side of things, you'll see where she's been, she works with police and government. Now, I didn't get into the government side of things because you and I have talked about the things you do for the government, which is really, really cool. And you, and of course, I'm not going to get into your clients who from around the world are people who are very well known in government and in business and things like that. But in fact, she won't even tell me about it. And I'm her friend. But every so often she'll drop.
Well, because I keep it quiet. I mean, they wouldn't use me if I told everything.
Yeah, but some of them are dead now.
You want some predictions for coming up?
Yes.
You want some predictions for coming up?
Sure, please.
Let's see. President Trump is going to be president for another 4 years.
For a full 4?
No, that's the thing. In the third year of his second term, something is going to happen, and I do not believe he will be president for the final year. I don't think it's a bad thing. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think it's like impeachment or anything like that. I believe something will happen to his health. That's what I believe.
Happen to his what?
So, his health.
His health? Yeah.
Yes, health. I'm sorry. It didn't come through. Yeah, so that, the global warming. Oh, let's talk about global warming. Global warming is not what they're saying it is. It's the Mondor minimum, and the Mondor minimum is that the sun's hot spots are cooling off. And I know that there are those that believe that that we're attacking our planet with carbon, and this planet has been here for billions of years, and I don't believe that we're affecting it. It is actually something going on outside of our atmosphere, and it's called the Mondor minimum. That's spelled MAUNDER minimum. So that's a little prediction that people will start understanding that more than the global warming portion. Let me see. Obviously, President Carter is getting ready to pass away.
And has been for quite a few years now.
Yeah, he has actually, but he's getting ready to leave really soon. So is Clinton. Those two are leaving. Oh, let's go back to, let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein, that one person that supposedly killed himself.
Yeah.
So, the one that, no, I do not believe he has passed away. I believe he is living life large in another part of the world. I believe that was a inside job. No, normally, I don't get into the what are they? Those
Conspiracies?
Conspiracy theories. Yeah, I don't do that. But this one, I asked if I could talk to him on the other side. Even if he was in the void, I asked to speak to him, and they told me he wasn't there. And I said, is he in the void and I just can't talk to him? No, he is not deceased. Well, now these entities, these spirit guides, are the same ones that tell me everything else, and they don't lie to me. So I know that he's not crossed over.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here's the one I was going to ask you. Now, you were an animal communicator when you were younger. Right, and probably still are.
Still am.
Communicator. Yes.
Still am. I have all these horses and dogs and everything, yeah.
Are you a vegetarian?
I eat anything I can kill, I will eat. I cannot kill a dog, a horse, a cat. I could kill a cow, so I eat that. And remember, I live on a farm.
Yes.
And so I can kill a chicken, I can kill fish. I don't eat a lot of red meat, though. I don't. It's hard for me. Never have eaten a lamb or a sheep or a goat. Funny story. I was in a place called Los Barrias in Mexico, 90 miles north of Cabo San Lucas, on a mini vacation, and I went to this home of the person that I was there with. His friend, his grandmother, had this place, and it was like there were 100 people. They were all related to her, and she was cooking for everybody, and she had ran out of food, meat, right? And I had been there, and I was petting this goat and everything, and I got the weirdest vibe from this goat, and I thought, okay, I don't know, little dude, what's going on, but I get a weird vibe from him. And I walked into the house to use the restroom, el baño, and I walked back out, and she goes, I have to have more food for you, while you're here and everything. And she slit the goat's throat right in front of me. I about passed out because I had never eaten goat. I was not going to eat goat right then. And that poor animal died right there, so I could have food that she thought that I was going to eat. It makes me nauseous and lightheaded thinking about it now. But I had picked up the vibe. The goat knew that he was going. Isn't that funny? Well, it's not funny, but isn't that odd?
Yeah,
that
funny
he knew
woo.
that he was. Yeah, funny woo-woo stuff. He knew he was leaving, and I just didn't. I had no reason to remote view that circumstance in that moment of time. I had no reason to do it. I just went into the restroom, came out, she slit the goat's throat right in front of me. I was like, oh, dear God. And the guy that was my friend that I was with, he knew instantly that I was about to pass out. So I eat fish and chicken primarily.
Have you ever talked to a cow?
Yeah. I try not to talk to them. No, try not to talk to them.
No.
There's so many around. Yeah, they're. I don't know. They're different. They're different little beings.
Yeah, I've talked to some.
I talk to the horses all the time.
Yeah. And see, I've talked to animal communicators and I've yet to find a vegan or vegetarian, full-on vegetarian animal communicator. They say cows almost understand that that's what they're here for, and same with
that's
chicken.
Their purpose. And chicken. However, a cow in India, not the same thing. Pigs are extremely intelligent.
Yeah,
you can communicate with a pig. It would be. It's harder for me with pigs. Yeah.
Yeah, pigs are something, and you look back in history over different religions where it's like, yeah, we don't eat pigs because A, B, and C. Well, because I think maybe back in the day some spirit who started the religion and wherever they were saying, if we tell them that pigs are smarter than they are, then they're just going to be upset. So we'll just tell them not to eat the pigs. The cows, horses, brilliant. We use them up here for people with post-traumatic stress syndrome from the military, these special ranches where the horses will actually pick the client and they'll look after that horse and the horse is looking after them. They seem to get really in between a negative energy and humans. They almost like it's a living guide.
I find it fascinating because horses will actually also do that in prisons. Did you know that? I mean, there are programs in prisons where they have horses that are just uncontrollable, and they will put them in a round pen and have the prisoners go in there, and the horses actually pick the prisoner that they want to work with, the inmate.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I think,
and I find that fascinating. However, that doesn't surprise me. I have horses that I can walk out into the pasture, and they all know if I'm going to feed them. They know if I'm coming out just to talk to them. They know if I'm out just walking around, and they know me very well. And I have so many of them for that to be that way. But I really love the horses. Yeah. I communicate. I have had them ever since I was a little girl.
Do you find that they also help keep away, like, if every dead person on the planet knows that you have a capability of getting hold of their parents and saying, look, I'm in the dumpster behind the 7-Eleven kind of thing, do you find the horses kind of block that from happening?
I don't know. I just know I have a lot of them.
Okay.
I have a lot of horses. So I keep the horses around me. Have since I was a little girl. Remember, I was doing this at 5, right?
Yeah.
In some form or capacity. I've had a horse since I was 3.
Now, when you say you have horses around you, are they in spirit as well as in real life?
No, I'm talking about in this reality.
In this reality,
I have
horses, yeah.
I have very many horses. However, I do have a lot on the other side. I just don't talk to them yet. I don't have any reason to talk to them. Just like my dogs. I have umpteen dogs, and yet I've had 2 dogs, one German Shepherd that lived 19 years and one that lived 17 years. So over a span of my lifetime, for 30-some odd years, I've had 2 dogs. Yet I've had probably 70 dogs in my life.
Yeah.
That have come into my world and helped me, or I've helped them, because most of my dogs I rescue. Everybody that comes into my life now is already their rescue.
Yeah, like me.
You're not a rescue.
Oh, come on. But I got to get going, and I want to thank you for your time. Yes, it's not. I'm not on that 3-hour show anymore. It's only about an hour and a half-ish, and we've gone even over on that. But I really want to thank you. Yeah, we'll have to. Well, we have to do this again.
Okay. Yes. And just remember, if you want to use one of my readings as a gift to somebody to promote something, feel free. I would love to do that for you and your program.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I hope everybody out there practices peace, beginning with themselves. And if we practice peace in that manner, eventually we'll get good at it.
And remember, go to MaryAnnMorgan.org. Look her up if you want.
That's it. Let's roll. And hey. Let's be careful out there.
Run through the hail like a flash of angry bull on the trail. Dead or alive, we're out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here comes the bounty to get the man you're after. No!
I see dead people.